The wind that howled through Whistler's Gorge didn't just carry the biting cold of an early Wyoming winter. It whispered the name of my partner, Daniel, a name I'd buried along with my U.S. Marshal's badge 3 years prior. I had left the law, left the world, to seek atonement in silence, but the silence only amplified the echoes of my failure. My homestead, nestled at the foot of the Wind River Range, wasn't a home. It was a tomb I'd built for my conscience. Every plank of wood was soaked in regret, and every sunset painted the sky the color of blood and mud, just like the day I found Daniel. That night, the blizzard came in screaming, a white monster roaring its intent to devour the world. I was by the fire, the familiar weight of my Winchester in my lap, listening to the symphony of chaos outside, when my hound, Ghost, let out a low growl. The hackles on his neck rose, his yellow eyes fixed on the door. I didn't get visitors. Ever. I grabbed the rifle, my heart hammering a cold, cautious beat. I cracked the door and a blast of Arctic wind and swirling snow drove inside. And then I saw it. A dark shape collapsed in the snow just feet from my porch. Not an animal. A person. The old instinct, the one I'd tried so hard to bury, took over. I plunged out into the knee-deep snow, the cold tearing through my coat. It was a woman. Her black hair was a spill of ink against the white, her face a pale blue under the faint moonlight. She was wearing a flimsy silk dress, a ridiculous thing for this wilderness, now torn and soiled. But it wasn't the cold or the clothes that froze the blood in my veins. On her exposed shoulder, where the dress was ripped away, was a brand, a scorpion seared into her flesh with unimaginable cruelty. I carried her inside, her body alarmingly light in my arms. I laid her near the hearth, the warmth melting the snowflakes in her hair. I was Silas Blackwood, a man who had run from violence. But tonight, violence had followed me to my door, carrying a deadly mystery branded on the skin of a stranger. As I removed her ruined satin shoes, I felt the icy blade of fear slide down my spine. Not for myself, but the fear that I was once again being drawn into a fight I couldn't win, that I would fail to protect another innocent life. She was delirious for 2 days. I'd sent for Dr. Elias Vance from the nearby town of Sage Creek, an old man with eyes that had seen too much and a heart that still managed to care. Elias cleaned the wound, shaking his head at the barbarism of the brand. "This isn't a rancher's mark, Si," he said, his voice low and weary. "This is a mark of ownership, a warning. Whoever this girl is running from, he's not a reasonable man. You recognize it?" I asked. Elias hesitated, polishing his spectacles. "There are whispers south of the border of a man who calls himself El Alacran, the Scorpion, a ruthless man, a smuggler who's built a small empire for himself. They say he marks everything he considers his." He put a hand on my shoulder. "Be careful, son. You've brought the storm indoors." When she woke, her eyes flew open. They were the color of honey in the sun, now just wild with panic. She flinched at the sight of me, scrambling backward, a terrified sound catching in her throat. I held up my hands, trying to appear harmless. "You're safe," I said, my voice hoarse from disuse. She didn't understand. She spoke Spanish, the words tumbling out in a broken torrent of fear and desperation. I knew little, just enough to catch words like run and monster. The next few days were a slow dance of caution. I left food and water for her at a distance. I avoided looking directly into her eyes for too long, afraid the raw terror I saw in them would shatter the wall of ice I'd built around my heart. Her name was Isabella. I learned it when she whispered it in her sleep, a beautiful name that didn't belong in this brutal world. Slowly, she began to trust me. She saw the quiet tenderness with which I tended to my horse. She saw me sit for hours just staring into the fire, lost in my own memories. She began to see that my demons were all internal. One evening, she pointed to the long scar on my forearm, a memento from my last gunfight. "You," she began, fumbling for the English word. "A good man?" The question hit me like a knife. I hadn't felt like a good man for a very long time. "I used to try to be," I answered, the words tasting like ash. The push and pull between us was almost unbearable. I longed to comfort her, to tell her everything would be all right. But to do so would be a lie. I knew El Alacran would come. Men like him never abandon their property. The more I cared for her, the more danger she was in. So I pushed her away. "When the snow thaws, you have to leave," I said, my voice clipped one morning. "It's not safe for you here." I saw the flash of hurt in her eyes, quick as a heartbeat, before it was hidden behind a veil of pride. She just nodded, her silence louder than any protest. But the outside world wouldn't wait for the thaw. A pair of bounty hunters drifted into Sage Creek. asking questions about a beautiful Spanish woman. Sheriff Brody, a practical man who disliked trouble beyond his jurisdiction, rode out to my homestead. "Silas, I don't know what you're hiding, and I don't want to know," he said, his gaze sharp. "But these men aren't the type you reason with. Give her up. It's the only way to keep this town peaceful." "I don't hand people over to hunting dogs," I shot back, my voice cold. Brody sighed. "You're not a marshal anymore, Si. You're just one man. And one man can be killed." His warning became a reality just a few days later. I was chopping wood when Ghost began to bark furiously. The two bounty hunters had decided to take matters into their own hands. They didn't count on a reclusive man being able to move so fast. The gunfight was over in seconds. I didn't kill them, but I left them with wounds and a clear message to take back to their master. Isabella Montoya was under my protection. That night, the wall between us crumbled. The adrenaline from the fight was still coursing through my veins. Isabella had run outside at the sound of the shots, her face a mask of terror. When she saw me standing, she did the unexpected. She ran to me and crashed into my arms, her body racked with tremors. "I thought," she whispered into my chest, her voice breaking. I wrapped my arms around her, breathing in the scent of wildflowers that clung to her hair. All my resolve to push her away dissolved. In that moment, she wasn't a burden or a danger. She was just a terrified woman, and I was the only man in the world who could protect her. "I'm here," I said, and the words were as much for me as they were for her. "I'm not going anywhere." We stood there for a long time under the star-dusted sky, our breath mingling in the frigid air. I looked down at her face, illuminated by the moon. Tears shimmered on her cheeks. I gently brushed them away with my thumb. Our eyes met, and the world seemed to stop. The push was over. There was only the pull. I bent my head and kissed her. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was born of fear, relief, and a desperate, long-suppressed hunger. It was a confession of everything we couldn't say. When we broke apart, both of us breathless, a new truth had been forged between us, fragile but undeniable. I was falling in love with this woman branded by a devil, and that love would either be my salvation or my damnation. Isabella finally told me the whole story. She was the daughter of a wealthy landowner in Mexico who had refused El Alacran's offer of a partnership. In revenge, he had murdered her father, seized their lands, and claimed her for himself. He had branded her in a cruel ceremony before his men, declaring her his permanent property. But he had underestimated her will. She had escaped, fleeing north with the hope of disappearing into the vast American frontier. "He will not stop," she said, her voice trembling but firm. "He is not a man. He is an obsession. He believes I belong to him, body and soul." Knowing the truth only hardened my resolve. This was no longer about sheltering a stranger. This was a fight against the kind of evil that had taken Daniel, the kind of evil that believed it had the right to own and destroy. We prepared. I taught Isabella how to use a rifle. She was hesitant at first, but soon she handled the weapon with a chilling calm. We fortified the cabin, set traps, and planned for the inevitable assault. In those tense days, we found moments of grace. A shared touch of hands while passing a coffee cup. A shared smile when Ghost did something foolish. We were building a small world for ourselves in the heart of the coming storm. And then, the storm came. One afternoon, as the sun began to dip, painting the mountains in blood-red hues, we heard the sound of hoofbeats. Not 2, but a dozen, maybe more. They surrounded the cabin, dark silhouettes in the twilight. At the front, on a jet-black stallion, was a man dressed in black from head to toe, a wide-brimmed hat shadowing his face. But I didn't need to see his face. His presence radiated a cold, venomous power. El Alacran, he didn't order an attack right away. He played with us. "Silas Blackwood!" His voice rang out, surprisingly smooth with a slight accent. "The former marshal. I have heard of you. A man of honor who lost it. Give me what is mine, and perhaps I will let you live with your shame." Isabella stood beside me at the window, her rifle held steady. "Do not listen to him," she whispered. "His words are poison. She is not yours," I yelled back, my voice echoing across the valley. "And you will not set foot in this house." A cold laugh was the only answer. Then all hell broke loose. Bullets tore through the night, slamming into the logs of the cabin like angry hornets. We fired back, moving from window to window in a deadly coordinated dance. Isabella was a natural shot, calm and focused. She didn't fight like someone who was scared. She fought like someone with nothing left to lose. The siege lasted through the night. They tried to set the roof on fire, but the damp snow foiled them. They tried to ram the door, but I'd reinforced it with iron bars. But we knew we couldn't last forever. Our ammunition was running low, Just before dawn, during an ominous lull, I knew he was preparing for the final push. "Isabella," I said, turning to her in the dim light, "I need you to promise me something. If I don't make it..." "Don't," she cut me off, pressing her fingers to my lips. "We make it through this together. Or not at all." She looked deep into my eyes, and in them, I saw no fear, only love. A fierce, unyielding love born of violence and tested by fire. She leaned in and kissed me, a kiss that was both a promise and a farewell. When they breached the door, I was ready. El Alacran came in first, 2 gleaming pistols in his hands. His face was finally revealed, cruelly handsome, with black eyes that held no warmth at all. "The game is over, Blackwood," he sneered. But he made a mistake. He focused on me, forgetting the woman he so disdained. From the shadows of the loft above, where I'd told her to hide, Isabella fired. The bullet from her rifle tore through El Alacran's shoulder, making him stagger. That moment of distraction was all I needed. I launched myself at him, and our fight was not a gun battle, but a brutal, primal struggle. We rolled across the floor, 2 men driven by opposing forces, he by possession, I by protection. Finally, my pistol was in my hand. I aimed it between his stunned eyes. "You branded her," I snarled, my breath coming in ragged gasps. "But you never owned her." I could have pulled the trigger. The part of me that died with Daniel wanted to. But then I saw Isabella, climbing down from the loft, her face strangely calm. She came to stand beside me. "No, Silas," she said softly. "Death is too easy for him. He has to live with his failure. He has to live knowing he was defeated by the woman he considered his property." When Sheriff Brody and his men arrived, alerted by Dr. Vance, they found El Alacran bound and the rest of his men either dead or fled. They found Isabella and me standing together amid the wreckage, exhausted but unbroken. That spring the snows melted, revealing a land that promised new life. The brand on Isabella's shoulder never faded, but it was no longer a symbol of shame. It was a reminder of her strength, of her survival. My homestead was no longer a tomb. Isabella's laughter filled it, chasing away the ghosts. The wind still whispered Daniel's name through the gorge, but now it didn't carry regret. It carried a promise, the promise of a future I thought I had lost forever. I hadn't found my redemption in solitude, but in the honey-colored eyes of a woman who taught me that even the deepest scars can learn to heal. Together we had faced the monster and we had won.